Nikki Haley is officially suspending her campaign after a long, drawn out campaign where she's just been beat by Donald Trump again and again. She has officially decided to call it quits. So let's go back and do an official campaign review. What did Nikki Haley do right and what did she do wrong? And maybe more importantly, what was even Nikki Haley's goal? What was her strategy? Nikki Haley from the get go did pretty well in one sense. She did fundraise very well. So I think she had about $17 million in total, which for a presidential campaign, maybe she could have done better, but still goes to show you that there were plenty of people in her camp. She ended up spending about 15 million of it. I think she currently at this point in time has maybe 2 million cash on hand, and that is yet to be seen how that will be spent now that she is pulling out. But what was her strategy? Well, you have to remember originally it was not a totally crowded field like it was in 2016's Republican primary, but you did have DeSantis, you had Tim Scott, you had Vivek Ramaswamy. And so Nikki Haley was just a part of that upending of potentially getting rid of Trump. Everyone betting on the fact that Trump might not make it to the primary at all, even the RNC caucus, because he might be put in jail. So everyone was betting on taking over Trump and hopefully him not being able to run. Nikki Haley, in that case, would have been a good bet if the idea was that Trump would not have been able to run. Very moderate, more so a neocon, kind of like a George Bush 2.0. Nikki Haley, if she had won the primary, and she definitely had the donations and donors to do so, had Trump not been involved, would have been kind of this substantial pick for a potentially good win in 2024. At least that was the thinking of her donors. A lot of her donors were establishment Republican types, like the Ken Griffins of the world, who are notoriously against more right-wing ideas, and then Americans for Prosperity, which are normally big corporate donors that are pro-open borders, pro-lax immigration rules, and above all, pro-war. So Nikki Haley definitely stemmed from the kind of pre-Trump Republican Party. And I think Nikki Haley is probably viewed as the last gasp of that pre-Trump Republican era. So Nikki Haley's original campaign strategy was this, and it actually had some bearings and followings of Marco Rubio's campaign strategy back in 2016. It's all about political momentum and mimetic momentum. So in politics, it's not about what your perceived win is today. It's about what your perceived win is going to be tomorrow, because people are run off of expectations of the future, not expectations of today. So all Nikki Haley had to do was come in third place in Iowa, second place in New Hampshire, and first place in South Carolina. That was Marco Rubio's strategy. The implication being you don't always have to finish first. You just have to look like momentum's building. And in a sense, that's exactly what Nikki Haley was doing. She came in third in Iowa, in which DeSantis came in second, barely. So that gave Nikki Haley a huge boost and made it look like a win for her. DeSantis ends up pulling out, which guaranteed Nikki Haley a second place spot in New Hampshire. So now all that was left was South Carolina, Nikki Haley's home state. But things have changed since Nikki Haley was governor of South Carolina. And much like now with DeSantis, it's all about brand identity. When Nikki Haley was governor of South Carolina, things were different. The political climate was different. And Nikki Haley, being kind of a pro-Trump, at least not a huge anti-Trump figure when she was governor, was a different Nikki Haley than the one who is strategically running against Trump. And that's the exact same thing with Ron DeSantis. Ron DeSantis, of course, being very pro-Trump during his governorship, but as soon as he decided to run for president, becomes kind of an anti-Trump figure, and now his brand is somewhat tarnished. Nikki Haley's brand was already tarnished. She was already known as a neocon, very disliked by not only Republicans, but Democrats in general, but she was still going to run because there was a lot of money at play. And another one of the bets, even if she didn't win South Carolina, was, you have to remember, the RNC rules. And the RNC delegates are pledged to you and they can't leave. What that means is Nikki Haley, after Super Tuesday, had around 89 pledged delegates. If something mysterious happens to Trump, Lord knows what that might be, Nikki Haley can say, well, even though I only have 89 delegates, I still have the second most amount of pledged delegates in the race, beating Ron DeSantis' only 9 pledged delegates, who's already pulled out. So there was a case to be made that Nikki Haley was just hedging bets on what would happen with Trump. But really, Nikki Haley's loss didn't come from Super Tuesday. It came the day before with the Colorado Supreme Court losing its decision to keep Trump off the ballot. Because that was at the end of the day the real goal. Remember this. Colorado's Supreme Court said Trump was not allowed on the Republican primary ballot. Had that case won, multiple states aligned with Nikki Haley, and I'm sure this was part of their strategy, would have simply kicked Trump off the primary or general election ballot, leaving Nikki Haley with an open path. So really, Nikki Haley's strategy wasn't just through our electoral system, as you would think it should be in an honest way. It was through the legal system. It was through the legal system. And in fact, a lot of Republicans were actually supporting these lawsuits to get Trump off the ballot, especially in some of the northeastern states. Some of the lawsuits were even brought about by quote unquote Republicans. So Nikki Haley's real loss can be traced all the way back, not to Super Tuesday in which she got trounced, but all the way back to the day before, Monday, when it was decided by the Supreme Court in a totally unanimous decision, 9-0, that states do not have the authority to kick Donald Trump off the ballot. So with Nikki Haley losing the South Carolina primary, it was very clear that she had no momentum. And momentum is what mattered. The fact that she got trounced so badly in South Carolina, her home state, showed that there was no real path to victory. And so knowing that, the fact that people were still giving her money and campaign donations then tells you the bigger picture that it's no longer about her winning. Nikki Haley and her donors, specifically her donors, simply become arms of the Democratic Party in an effort to dissuade voters from voting for Trump. That is the real reason Nikki Haley continued to run for president, as she knew she had no long shot in running. However, in backhand negotiations with her donors, it would not surprise me if Nikki Haley ended up getting some kind of position, even quietly, with the Biden administration if they were to win in 2024. That is how politics works. Of course, the Biden administration would have to be careful of the optics of this. But when you have situations like this, where Nikki Haley is essentially running as a Democratic operative, which has been proven time and time again by the fact that the districts that she won, for example, in Iowa, were all Democratic districts. The districts that she won in New Hampshire were all Democratic districts. South Carolina, of course, is a slightly different story. But you get the idea that Nikki Haley really is just a pre-2024 election race, Trump versus your average Democrat. But Nikki Haley kind of represents, even kind of more so, the current Democratic status of power. Nikki Haley's differences from Joe Biden really aren't all that much. They're both very open immigration, open borders. They're both very pro-war. Their only nuances in their difference is how they might treat, say, the healthcare system. But both of them would be for crony healthcare, crony capitalism, and big pharma. Both of them follow the same exact talking points if you look at their Twitters over time and some of the largest social issues. Nikki Haley was pro-BLM. You could even argue that she's for gun control. Even though she comes from a very conservative state, Nikki Haley, by every factor according to the modern Republican and conservative day standing points, is not right-wing in any shape or form. If anything, she is center-left, and maybe even to today's standards, further left than people would predict. So it's no surprise that she lost. But once again, what is a loss? She knew she was never going to win. This was her donors' efforts to hedge their bets against Trump possibly losing in his Supreme Court cases. So for Nikki Haley, winning at the end of the day is hopefully getting people to defect from the Republican Party and not vote for Trump at all in 2024. There's nothing Nikki Haley wants more than a Trump loss. So it doesn't really matter to her whether she's the vehicle for actually becoming president or just a vehicle for Trump losing. And that's why when you look at these presidential races, these presidential candidates, the American mind assumes that it's all about winning. But you have to classify what a win is and what a loss is. And for someone like Nikki Haley, a win is any time Donald Trump loses. And whether that's directly toward her or to someone else like a Biden or any other kind of Democrat who might be running, that for Nikki Haley is a win. And so Her campaign being suspended, her lack of cash on hand, her officially pulling out, yes, is good. It's good because now Trump can officially run against Biden and the American people will finally get a more clear and cut presidential race. But for Nikki Haley, she won't be leaving the scene anytime soon. I'm sure she will run again in the future. I'm sure she will try to run for Congress, run for some open position, if not be a Fox News talking head because she's an establishment favorite. So Nikki Haley, unfortunately, will probably be with us for a long time. Hopefully, as things change, even amidst the Republican and the Democratic parties, this taste for people like Nikki Haley will continue to rise, and there will be no opportunities for people such as her because even on both sides of the aisle, people have had enough of candidates of her ilk.